Angela Brooks had not planned to stop anywhere that evening. She had told herself that a dozen times as she pulled into the parking lot of Hartwell Market, the kind of grocery store that charged $12 for a jar of imported honey and arranged its flowers the way museums arranged paintings. She had driven past 3 perfectly good supermarkets on the way home, each one closer, each one cheaper, each one a sensible choice. But the day had stretched itself into something unreasonable, and she was tired in the particular way that parents who work full-time understand. Tired not just in the body but somewhere behind the eyes, and she had promised her daughter Maya a specific brand of sparkling water that the other stores never carried. So she had turned left instead of right, had guided her 7-year-old Civic into a space between a silver Range Rover and a pearl-white Lexus, and had told herself she would be in and out in 10 minutes. 15 at most. That was the thing about plans. They had no interest in surviving contact with reality. Angela was 35 years old. She carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had learned that composure is a resource, not a luxury, and she had learned to conserve it carefully. She was the operations manager at a mid-sized nonprofit called Bridgeway Community Partners, an organization that connected low-income families with housing resources, legal aid, and job training across the city. She had been there for 6 years. Before that, she had done 2 years of contract work for a city housing authority, and before that, she had been finishing her degree at night while working days at a staffing agency. She had built her life the way most people build things when they have no one to hand them materials slowly, piece by piece, with enormous attention to each individual joint. She was a single mother. Maya's father had left 3 years ago, gently and without cruelty, which somehow made the departure harder to process. Angela did not talk about that much. She did not talk about most of the harder things. She moved through her days with a steadiness that people around her often mistook for ease, and she never corrected them. Hartwell Market occupied the ground floor of a new mixed-use development in the city's renovated East Corridor, the kind of neighborhood that had once been industrial and was now expensive. The ceilings inside were high and vaulted, the lighting warm and deliberate, the floors the color of pale sand. Artisan cheese sat beside hand-labeled wine. Small placards explained the provenance of the olive oils. The clientele matched the setting, well-dressed, unhurried, carrying oversized tote bags that cost more than Angela's monthly grocery budget. She was not uncomfortable here exactly. She had learned long ago not to let a room make her feel like she did not belong in it. But she was aware, as she always was in spaces like this, of a low-frequency signal in the atmosphere, something that communicated, without ever saying so directly, that her presence required a quiet kind of justification. She grabbed a small basket and moved through the aisles efficiently. The sparkling water for Maya, a wedge of good Parmesan because she was making pasta on Sunday, a small bunch of tulips, yellow, because Maya had asked for flowers last week and Angela had forgotten. She was precise and economical in her shopping, the way she was precise and economical in most things. She had 15 minutes, and she intended to use them cleanly. Victoria Sterling arrived at Hartwell Market in the way that certain people arrive everywhere, as though the location had been waiting for her. She came through the entrance with 2 women who laughed on cue and adjusted their posture when she spoke. Victoria was 51, lean and polished in the manner of someone who has invested in that polish since her 30s. Her husband, Leonard Sterling, was a real estate and hospitality billionaire, whose name appeared regularly on the sort of lists that ranked human beings by the size of their net worth. Victoria had been married to him for 22 years. In that time, she had become, by her own accounting, a person of consequence. She sat on charitable boards, but did not attend the meetings. She gave large donations and made certain that everyone knew the amounts. She moved through the world with the absolute assurance of someone who has never had to wonder whether she would be served next or asked to wait, and she had somewhere along the way confused that assurance with wisdom. Her group moved through the store with the ease of familiarity. The floor manager, a thin man named Gerald, who had worked at Hartwell for 11 years, materialized near the entrance and greeted Victoria by name. A younger staff member was dispatched to carry her basket. Victoria accepted this attention as fact, the way one accepts weather, and continued her conversation about a gallery opening she had attended the previous Thursday. Angela was in the specialty items aisle, reaching for the last bottle of sparkling mineral water on the shelf, the particular brand, the specific size, the exact thing she had come for, when she heard heels on the hard floor behind her. She did not turn around immediately. She had the bottle. Her fingers were already closing around it. She turned only when a voice addressed the air directly above her shoulder. "Excuse me." The tone of the words was not a question. It was a statement wearing a question's clothing. Angela turned. Victoria Sterling stood 2 feet away, her basket held by the young staff member at her side, her gaze moving across Angela, the way a person's gaze moves across a room when they are deciding whether anything in it is worth their attention. "That's the last one," Angela said, pleasantly enough. She meant it as an acknowledgement of the situation, not a declaration of possession. "Yes," Victoria said. "I can see that." There was a pause of perhaps 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Victoria looked at Angela's clothes, clean dark jeans, a fitted jacket from a mid-range brand, sensible flats, and something shifted in her expression. Not dramatically, just enough. The corners of her mouth did something small and cold. "I suppose we all make do with what we can find," Victoria said. Her companions made a sound that was not quite laughter, almost laughter, the sound people make when they want credit for the laugh without the full commitment of making it. Angela looked at her directly. "Have a good evening," she said, and placed the bottle in her basket and walked away. It should have ended there. Most things should end at the moment when they still can. But Victoria Sterling had not arrived at her particular version of herself by letting small disagreements conclude on someone else's terms. She followed Angela's path with her eyes, and she said something to her companions. Something low, and they laughed again, and this time it was full laughter, unreserved. Angela heard it. She kept walking. She had 2 more items to find, and she found them, and she made her way to the checkout. The store was not busy at this hour. One lane was open, staffed by a young woman named Deja, who looked like she was calculating how many hours remained in her shift. Angela sate her items on the belt, the sparkling water, the parmesan, the yellow tulips. Dia began scanning. Angela reached into her bag for her wallet. The sound of expensive heels on tile announced the approach before the presents arrived. Angela did not look up immediately. She heard Victoria's voice behind her, addressing one of her companions, but the volume was calibrated, deliberately calibrated to carry. "You see this all the time now," Victoria said. "People who wander in from other parts of town and take up space in places they clearly can't afford. It's almost charitable of the management to allow it." Angela's hands went still inside her bag. Deja looked up from the register and then immediately looked back down. The other customers near the checkout, a man in a blue blazer, 2 women with matching stroller bags, shifted their attention toward the sound, without fully committing to looking. "Single mother types especially," Victoria continued, and now she was no longer even pretending to be in a side conversation. She was performing. You can always tell. It's something about the way they carry themselves. Like they're one bad week away from a crisis, and they want everyone around them to feel sorry about it. The man in the blue blazer looked away. One of the stroller women made a face, and then smoothed it. Deja's fingers moved on the register keys without expression. Angela stood at the checkout with both hands on the edge of the counter. She was still. She had gone very still, the way water goes still when it has decided not to show what is moving beneath its surface. She breathed. She thought of Maya, who was at home with the upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, probably watching something too loud on the television and eating the crackers Angela had asked her not to eat before dinner. She thought of none of the things she wanted to say, which were numerous. She thought, specifically, of the deliberate dignity that she had carried as a conscious choice for the better part of her adult life, the decision to refuse the invitation to become loud when people wanted her to be loud, to refuse the invitation to be small when people wanted her to be small. She breathed. The register beeped. Deja named the total. Angela paid without a word, picked up her bag, and walked toward the exit. "Have a lovely evening," Victoria said to her back. The tone was theatrical, arch, the closing line of a performance. A few people nearby made sounds that were difficult to classify, part amusement, part discomfort, part the specific cowardice of not wanting to be involved. Angela pushed through the door. The evening air met her like something honest. What she did not see, as she left what she could not have known, was that the man in the blue blazer was still standing where he had been standing. He had not moved. He had watched all of it without expression, his posture unchanged, his gaze fixed on the checkout lane with the quality of attention that belongs to people accustomed to observing things carefully before deciding what to do about them. His name was Marcus Reed, and he was not in Hartwell Market by coincidence. Marcus Reed was 42 years old. He was the founder and majority shareholder of Reed Capital Partners, a private equity and venture firm that had, over the previous decade, made investments across 7 industries and 12 cities. His name appeared in the press only when he made an acquisition large enough that silence became unrealistic, and he had arranged his life deliberately around that condition. He did not attend the galas where Leonard Sterling was photographed. He did not sit on the same boards or frequent the same restaurants. He moved through the professional world in the manner of someone who has learned that the people with the most actual power are almost never the ones who need the room to know it. He had built his influence through a combination of patience, long-term thinking, and a personal code that he applied, without exception and without announcement. He did not do business with people he did not respect, and he did not respect people who treated others as furniture. This was not a principle he had arrived at through a dramatic experience or a formative revelation. It was simply the thing he believed, held the way people hold the things they believe, deeply, quietly, completely, without needing to explain it. He had a reputation, among those who knew him well, for a particular kind of attention. He listened before he spoke. He observed before he acted. He had sat in boardrooms where decisions worth hundreds of millions of dollars were under discussion and said almost nothing until the moment he said one precise thing, and that one thing reorganized the entire conversation. His assistant Elise, who had worked with him for 4 years and understood his operating rhythms the way a good navigator understands a ship, described his essential quality to a mutual colleague once as follows: "He sees what is actually happening, not what people want him to see. What is happening." He was a man of very few public positions, but this was one of them, held quietly and applied consistently, and it had shaped every decision he had made in the preceding 2 decades. He had not come to Hartwell Market for groceries. He had come because his assistant had arranged for him to meet with the market's ownership group regarding a potential investment in a planned regional expansion. The meeting had been scheduled for the back office in 20 minutes. He had arrived early, as he always did, and had been walking the floor he always walked any business floor before a meeting, the same way a musician listens to the acoustics of a hall before agreeing to perform in it when he had heard the first exchange in the specialty items aisle. He had not intervened. He had observed. He had continued to observe through the checkout. He had watched the whole thing with the kind of clarity that comes from standing slightly outside a situation while remaining completely present within it. After Angela's departure, he stood for another moment. Then he took out his phone, typed a brief message to his assistant, and put it away. He walked to the back of the store and knocked on the office door. He had a meeting to attend. But the meeting had just become about more things than a regional expansion. Marcus's assistant was a precise and capable woman named Elise, who had worked for him for 4 years, and understood that when he sent her a text consisting only of a name and the word full background, she was to set aside whatever else she was doing. The name he had sent her was not Victoria Sterling's. He already knew everything relevant about Victoria Sterling. He had known Leonard Sterling peripherally for years. He had declined 2 business introductions to Leonard's group precisely because of what he knew about how the Sterling organization operated. The name he had sent Elise was Angela Brooks. Within 2 hours, Elise had compiled what she found. It was not difficult material to find. Angela Brooks was not a hidden person. She was simply not a celebrated one. She was the operations manager at Bridgeway Community Partners, where she had, according to public records and local press coverage from the previous 3 years, restructured the organization's intake process, in a way that had reduced client wait times by roughly 40%, secured two significant federal grants that had expanded the organization's reach into 3 new zip codes, and built a volunteer coordination program that had logged more than 11,000 service hours in the previous fiscal year alone. She had spoken at 2 city council hearings about housing policy. She had received a community leadership recognition from the mayor's office 2 years prior. She was also, as Elise noted at the bottom of her summary, a sitting advisory board member at the Northside Community Foundation, a foundation whose endowment Marcus Reed had personally funded 8 years ago, and whose grant-making committee he still chaired. Marcus read the summary twice. He set his phone face down on the conference table where the Hartwell ownership group was watching him with the quiet anxiety of people who have just realized that a meeting they thought was going one direction is going another. "Tell me," Marcus said, in the tone of voice he used when he wanted an honest answer rather than a managed one. "What is your policy regarding how your staff responds to incidents of customer harassment on the floor?" The ownership group, 3 men in their 40s and 50s, well-dressed, competent in the ordinary sense, not accustomed to this particular kind of question, in this kind of meeting, looked at one another. The oldest of them said that of course they had policies, that they took such matters very seriously. Marcus nodded. He asked if they had camera coverage of the checkout area. They said they did. He asked if they would be willing to review the footage from the past 90 minutes together. There was a pause. The oldest man said he supposed they could. Marcus said he thought they should. They watched the footage in near silence. The angle was clear. The audio was partial but sufficient. When it ended, Marcus did not speak for a moment. Then he said quietly, "Your floor manager greeted that woman by name when she entered. A staff member carried her basket. Your checkout employee did not say one word during the entire incident, and no manager intervened. I want you to think carefully about what that sequence of events communicates to every other customer in this store who does not happen to be Mrs. Sterling." The ownership group was quiet. The youngest of them said something about difficult situations being hard to navigate in real time. Marcus looked at him with a particular patience. "The woman who was humiliated at your checkout tonight is an advisory board member at the Northside Community Foundation, which I fund. She has spent the last 6 years building systems that house families and connect people to resources that keep them stable. She came to your store to buy sparkling water and a bunch of flowers. She was publicly degraded, and every employee who witnessed it chose silence." He paused. "I want to know what you're going to do about it." There was a long pause. Then the ownership group began, slowly and then with more urgency, to talk. Angela did not know any of this was happening. She drove home with the windows down a little, the evening air moving through the car, cool and neutral, the kind of air that asks nothing and offers nothing. She had NPR on low, not listening to it, just allowing the steady cadence of voices to occupy the silence so she did not have to. She passed a playground where 2 teenagers were shooting hoops under the lights, and she registered it without registering it, the way the mind absorbs small, ordinary things on evenings when the larger things are still settling. She did not call anyone. She did not process the incident aloud. She had learned that processing things aloud had a way of keeping them alive longer than necessary, feeding them the oxygen of words when the better strategy was to let them find their own level in the dark. She had a version of this discipline that she had developed, not from a philosophy book, but from experience, from having learned over years that the people who survived difficult things with their sense of self intact were generally the people who refused to let difficult things become the organizing story of who they were. She was not her worst moments. She was not either the worst moments that other people tried to impose on her. She made pasta. She put the yellow tulips in the jar she kept on the windowsill. She helped Maya with the reading worksheet that had been due 2 days ago, and which they had both managed to forget. She put Maya to bed. She sat at the kitchen table after, with a glass of water, not thinking about anything in particular, which was its own kind of exhaustion. She was not crushed by what had happened at the store. She would not have said so because it was not fully accurate. What had happened had landed somewhere in her, had settled in the space where the 100 other accumulated moments of her life had settled. The moments in elevators and meeting rooms and parking lots and grocery stores when someone had looked at her and made a calculation, and then communicated the result of that calculation, without apology or self-consciousness, as though the calculation itself were unremarkable, as though the outcome were simply geography. She was not destroyed by it. She was tired in the way that people are tired, when something happens for a reason they already understand. When the world confirms something, they have spent years hoping it would stop confirming. The quiet exhaustion, not of surprise, but of recognition. She sat with her water. She would be fine. She was always fine. That was, in some ways, its own quiet cost to be someone who is always fine, someone whose composure is so practiced that it becomes invisible, so that the cost of maintaining it also becomes invisible, and the people around you take the steadiness for granted because they have never seen you without it, and so have never understood what it requires. Victoria Sterling did not give the incident at Hartwell Market a second thought that night. She had dinner at a French restaurant with her husband and two other couples. She ordered the duck. She discussed the gallery opening again, with new details she had remembered on the drive over. She came home at 11 and took off her jewelry with the practiced efficiency of a woman who has taken off expensive jewelry every evening for 2 decades. And the woman at the grocery store was not a thing she carried into sleep. The next morning, she had coffee and returned 4 calls and confirmed a booking for a private room at a hotel for a luncheon she was hosting the following week. She received a message from the events coordinator of the Meridian Foundation's annual gala. She was on the planning committee, informing her that the committee had decided to restructure the chair positions and would be in touch about a new arrangement. She found this mildly irritating, interpreted it as organizational inefficiency, which was consistent with her general view of how most organizations operated without her specific management, and filed it away to address later. Later, she noticed that a woman who ran a prominent wellness brand, a woman who called Victoria at least twice a month, and whom Victoria regarded as a reasonably close acquaintance, had not returned her call from 2 days prior. She left another message. The silence that followed was the silence of a phone that has nothing to say back to you, which is a different silence from the silence of a phone you simply haven't checked. By midday, a different texture had entered the atmosphere. A meeting request from a business partner of Leonard's, a man named Ellsworth who managed commercial real estate and who had attended Victoria's Christmas party for each of the past 7 years, was declined without explanation. A charity event she co-chaired sent a delicately worded message suggesting that given the current period of organizational review, it might be best to place her co-chair responsibilities temporarily on pause. She called her friend Deborah, one of the women who had been with her at Hartwell Market the previous evening. Deborah picked up but was unusually brief, said she was in the middle of something and would call back. She did not call back. Victoria mentioned this at dinner, casually, as a cluster of small peculiarities that probably meant nothing. Leonard, who had been in 3 meetings about a hotel acquisition in another city and had checked his messages infrequently, said it was probably nothing and reached for the salt. Victoria agreed that it was probably nothing, but something sat at the edge of her awareness like a sound you cannot fully identify, present and slightly wrong. By the second morning, the shape of the thing had become less ambiguous. She learned that the Meridian Foundation had not restructured anything. She learned this because she called the executive director directly, a woman she had known for a decade, and asked the direct question, and the executive director's pause was 1 second too long before she said that perhaps they could meet and discuss it properly. Victoria said she would rather discuss it now. The executive director said, gently and carefully, that there had been some concerns raised. Victoria asked what concerns. The executive director said they were concerns about. She paused again about certain conduct that had been observed. And then she said Marcus Reed's name. Victoria sat down. She was in her home office, at her desk, in front of the quarterly charitable giving report she had been reviewing. She sat down the way people sit down when their legs have made a decision that their mind has not yet caught up to. Marcus Reed, she said. What does Marcus Reed have to do with this? The executive director said she was not entirely certain of the details, but she understood that Mr. Reed had raised some concerns following an incident that had occurred publicly, and that given Mr. Reed's position within the philanthropic community, several organizations had felt it prudent to. She paused a third time to exercise caution. Victoria said she did not understand. The executive director said she thought perhaps it would be worth Victoria reaching out directly to Mr. Reed. And then the call ended, with the particular politeness reserved for conversations that are actually over, but have not yet found the language for it. Victoria did not reach out to Marcus Reed that day. She did not know how to reach Marcus Reed. She had spoken to him perhaps twice in her life, at events where Leonard and Marcus had been in the same room and introductions had been made. She had found him unremarkable both times, which in retrospect she recognized as a failure of observation on her part. She called Leonard. Leonard, this time, put down his phone and listened. When she finished explaining, Leonard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Marcus Reed," in a tone she had not heard him use often, a tone of considerable respect, slightly wary. He said he would make a call. The call took place the following afternoon. Leonard and Marcus spoke for 22 minutes, which was, for Marcus, a long phone call. Marcus was direct without being theatrical. He described what he had witnessed at Hartwell Market. He described his conversation with the ownership group. He described, in plain terms, how the incident had been covered by the store's camera system and what that footage showed. He said that he had not made this public because he did not believe in public destruction as a primary tool. He said that he had raised concerns with organizations that he was professionally connected to because he believed that professional communities have both the right and the obligation to hold their members accountable for their conduct. He said that if Victoria wished to understand the full scope of what he had seen, he was willing to meet with her directly. He said, finally, that the woman who had been humiliated at Hartwell Market was Angela Brooks, that Angela was a board member at the Northside Community Foundation, and that he considered her not only a colleague, but someone whose work he held in the highest personal regard. Leonard thanked him. He said he understood. He said the words with the weight of a man who genuinely did understand, not just the surface of the statement, but the structure beneath it. When he put down the phone and went to find his wife, his face had the expression of someone carrying something heavy across a room. Victoria met with Marcus Reed 3 days later. The meeting took place in the lobby of a small hotel, Neutral Ground, as Marcus had suggested. She arrived first, which was unusual for her. She sat at a table near the window with a cup of tea she did not drink and waited. Marcus arrived at the exact time he had said he would. He was unhurried. He sat down without the preliminary social performance that most meetings begin with, the small talk about traffic and weather, and he looked at her directly and said, "Thank you for coming." His voice was not warm, but it was not unkind. It was the voice of a person who has decided to spend his time precisely and does not believe in decorative friction. Victoria had prepared remarks. She had gone over them in the car. She had planned to explain the context, to suggest that things had been misinterpreted, to offer the defense that she had been having a difficult week and that her words had not been meant the way they were received. She had planned to be articulate, which was something she was usually very good at being. She looked at Marcus Reed across the table, and the prepared remarks dissolved before she could reach them. "I want to understand," she said, "what exactly you saw." It was not what she had planned to say, but it was the truest thing she had access to in that moment. Marcus told her. He was precise. He did not editorialize. He described the specialty items aisle, the checkout, the specific words he had heard, the specific silences of the people nearby, Angela's departure, the stillness of her back as she walked out through the doors. He described the footage from the camera. He described Angela's expression in the footage, which was the expression of someone maintaining something at significant personal cost. He used no dramatic language. He did not say that it was cruel or shameful or wrong. He simply described what had happened, and the description was sufficient. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Marcus waited. He was patient, in a way that had nothing performative in it. "You funded the foundation she sits on," Victoria said. It was not an accusation. It was a piece of information she was placing carefully in the arrangement of what she now understood. "For 8 years," Marcus said. But that's not why what happened matters. Victoria looked at the table. I know, she said, quietly. I know it isn't. She looked up. Who is she? What does she do? Marcus told her. He told her about Bridgeway Community Partners. He told her about the housing programs, the grant work, the 11,000 volunteer hours. He told her about the families that Angela's systems had touched, not the statistics, but the actual structure of what the work meant, what it changed, who it reached. Victoria listened. She did not interrupt. Something in her face was doing something that was not comfortable to do in front of a stranger, and she did not try to stop it. She seemed, Victoria said finally, and then she stopped. She tried again. She had a dignity about her that She stopped again. She set down the tea. I was trying to make her feel small, she said. I knew what I was doing. Marcus looked at her. He did not agree or disagree. He simply received the statement. The strange part, Victoria continued, is that I don't know why I needed to. I have every possible advantage. Everyone. And I still needed to do that to a woman who was buying groceries. She said the last sentence in a way that suggested she was hearing herself say it, measuring the weight of it as it left her mouth. Marcus said, The things we do when we don't need to do them tell us the most about who we are. He picked up his coffee cup, which he had not touched, found it had gone cold, and set it back down without comment. He stood. He thanked her for the meeting. He said that how things proceeded from here was entirely her decision, and that he was not in the business of determining outcomes for other people. He left without ceremony. Victoria sat at the table for a long time after he left, her untouched tea cooling beside her. The Hartwell Market Ownership Group had moved with more speed than anyone had expected once Marcus had made his expectations clear. There was a formal review of the incident, aided by the camera footage. There was a meeting with the full floor staff, led by an outside consultant who specialized in workplace conduct and customer relations. Gerald, the floor manager, was given a formal corrective conversation about preferential treatment and its implications. The checkout employee, Deja, was offered additional training and support and was told clearly that silence in the face of harassment is not neutrality. New protocols were written and posted. And then the ownership group asked Marcus what they should do next. And Marcus said the answer to that question was straightforward. They should find Angela Brooks and apologize to her directly and completely. Angela received a phone call from the store's general manager on a Thursday afternoon. She was at her desk at Bridgeway, in the middle of reviewing a draft grant proposal, the kind of document that required holding many numbers and several arguments in the mind simultaneously and testing each one against the others for consistency. She let the call go to voicemail because she did not recognize the number and because she had a discipline about unknown numbers during work hours that she applied without exception. She listened to the voicemail at lunch, sitting at the small table by the window in the break room with a container of leftover rice and her phone face up beside her plate. The general manager's name was Philip Crane, and his message was formal and careful and somewhat halting, the message of a person who has been told to say something important and is nervous about the saying of it. He said that the store had become aware of an incident involving a customer that had taken place in their store earlier that week, and that he would very much like to speak with her personally regarding the store's formal apology and the steps being taken. He left his direct line. Angela listened to the message twice. She held her phone for a moment after, looking at the middle distance. She thought about calling her friend Renata, who was the kind of person who would know exactly what to say, and would say it at length and with significant passion. She did not call Renata. She called back Philip Crane. The conversation lasted 12 minutes. Philip Crane apologized first for the conduct of the customer and then for the conduct, or more specifically, the inaction of his staff. He said the store should have been a place where every customer was safe from harassment, and it had failed in that responsibility. He said this without hedging, and without the legal language that organizations use when they want to apologize without actually apologizing. He said he was sorry. Angela listened. She said thank you, and that she appreciated the call. Philip Crane asked if she would be willing to come in at a time that was convenient for her, so that the apology could be delivered properly, in person, and also so that he could personally explain what changes had been made. Angela said she would think about it. She called him back the following day and said yes. She went on a Saturday morning. Maya was with her aunt, which was a relief because Angela did not want to manage the logistics of a significant conversation while also managing a 7-year-old's attention span. The store was open, quietly busy with the Saturday morning crowd. Philip Crane met her at the entrance and led her to the small conference room in the back, the same room where, she did not know, Marcus Reed had watched camera footage 6 days earlier. The conversation was quiet and honest. Philip was straightforward and did not minimize. Angela was composed and clear. She said she appreciated what had been done. She said she had not expected it. She said that the reason she appreciated it was not primarily for herself, but for what it meant to the people who worked in the store and the other customers who passed through it. She said that what had happened had not broken her, but that the silences in the room had cost her something. The silence of the bystanders, the silence of the staff, because silence is a kind of decision, and decisions have weight. Philip listened to this carefully. When the meeting was over, she walked back through the store, and Deja was at the checkout, and Deja looked up and said, "Good morning," in a voice that meant something, and Angela said good morning back. 3 days after that, she received a message through the Northside Community Foundation's administrative channel. The message was from Marcus Reed. It said simply that he was aware of a difficult experience she had recently navigated, and that he hoped she was well, and that he would like to have coffee, when convenient, if she was open to it. Angela read the message, and then sat for a minute. Marcus Reed was not someone she knew well, but he was someone she had worked alongside in the foundation context for the past 2 years. He was measured and deliberate, qualities she respected, and he was one of the people whose investment in Bridgeway's adjacent work she had been grateful for, without having many opportunities to say so directly. She replied that she was free Thursday morning. They met at a small cafe, 4 blocks from the foundation's offices. Marcus arrived, as he apparently always did, exactly on time. They ordered coffee and sat with the good silence that people sit with when they do not need to fill every moment with sound. Marcus said he owed her an explanation, and then he gave her one. He told her that he had been in Hartwell Market that evening. He told her what he had seen. He told her about the footage, the conversations with the ownership group, the contact with the relevant organizations in his professional network. He did not present it as a heroic account. He presented it as a description of things he had decided were necessary, given what he had witnessed. Angela listened to the full account. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "You didn't have to do any of that," she said. Marcus said, "No." He agreed that he had not been required to. "But you did," she said. He said, "Yes." She looked at her coffee cup. "I didn't tell anyone," she said. "About that night. I just went home." Marcus said, "I know." She looked up. "Does that seem strange to you, that I didn't say anything?" He considered the question with the genuine consideration it deserved, rather than answering it quickly. "No," he said. "I think it takes an enormous amount of strength to decide not to spend energy on something that tried to diminish you. The fact that you went home and made dinner and put your daughter to bed is not nothing. It's actually everything." Angela looked at him for a moment. She picked up her coffee. "She sent me a letter," she said. "Victoria Sterling. Last week. A handwritten letter." Marcus raised his eyebrows very slightly, which was the equivalent, for him, of a substantial reaction. "What did it say?" Angela set her coffee down. "It said she was sorry. Not sorry she'd gotten caught. Sorry in the way that sounds like someone talking to themselves as much as to you, trying to understand something about themselves." She paused. "I don't know if she meant it. I don't know if it matters whether she meant it. I read it once, and I put it away." Marcus said, "That seems right." She said, "I'm not going to pretend the apology fixed anything. What happened happened." He said, "Yes." She said, "But I'm also not going to carry it forever. I have enough things to carry." He said nothing, which was the right response, and they sat for a while with their coffee in the ordinary, companionable morning of 2 people who understand that most of the important things have already been said. Victoria Sterling made several changes in the months that followed. Some of them were visible and some were not. She resigned from 2 charitable boards where she had attended infrequently and donated performatively. And she joined one where she was asked to actually do work reviewing, grant applications, attending site visits, reading reports. She found, with some surprise, that the work had a different texture than the events she had previously associated with philanthropy. She reduced the frequency with which she purchased things, for the purpose of being seen purchasing them. She began noticing, as though a specific filter had been lifted from her vision, how her staff moved around her cautiously, preemptively, always slightly braced, and she understood that she had trained them to move that way, and that she had taken it for a kind of respect. She made no grand public announcements about any of this. She did not document her growth for anyone's benefit but her own. She had been seen clearly by one person, and that clear seeing had done something that a decade of unchallenged ease had not managed to do. Whether she sustained it, whether the changes were durable or merely responsive, was a question that only time would answer. Angela Brooks continued her work. The fall grant cycle brought 2 applications that she was cautiously optimistic about. Bridgeway expanded its intake hours for the 3rd year running, which meant more families reached, more cases opened, more crises converted into stability. Maya turned 8 in October, and Angela threw a party with a rainbow cake and precisely the correct number of balloons, which Maya had specified in a written list submitted 10 days in advance. Angela had read the list with the particular combination of amusement and love that is the specific feeling of parenting a child who has somehow come out more organized than you intended. She pinned the list to the refrigerator and sourced every item on it. The party was a success. She went back to Hartwell Market twice, in the months after the incident. The first time she was slightly tense in the approach, which she noted and filed. The second time, she was not. Deja was at the checkout both times. They exchanged the brief, mutual warmth of 2 people who have recognized each other through an experience they did not choose but share. Angela bought the sparkling water and the tulips. She stood in the store without justifying her presence to herself or to anyone else, which had always been her right and which it had cost her something to continuously exercise. In the high-vaulted space, with the warm, deliberate light and the artisan cheese beside the hand-labeled wine, she was a customer, and she was treated like one, and the naturalness of that should not have been an achievement. But it was, and she accepted it without ceremony, the way she accepted most things she had earned. Marcus Reed continued his work. He made the investment in Hartwell's regional expansion, conditional on the implementation of conduct protocols that were clear, trained, and enforced. He chaired the Northside Community Foundation's annual review meeting in November, at which Angela presented Bridgeway's outcomes for the year. The presentation was efficient and detailed, and evidenced with data that was difficult to misread. He had heard her present before, but this time he listened differently, with the full context of what he knew about who she was and what she carried and what she had refused to put down, even when someone had tried, in a grocery store on an ordinary evening, to relieve her of it. He asked 3 questions at the end, the kind of questions that are also a form of respect. What the evening at Hartwell Market had shown to Marcus, to the ownership group, to Victoria Sterling, in ways she was still processing, to Deja at the checkout, who had gone home and thought about it for several nights after, was something that very simple situations sometimes show when someone is paying close enough attention, that there is a kind of power that announces itself, that demands its bearer be seen carrying it, that needs other people to be less in order to be itself, and that there is another kind of power that does not announce anything, that goes home and makes dinner, that builds things slowly, without materials handed to it, that maintains its composure, not because composure is easy, but because it is chosen, again and again, in full knowledge of the cost. That holds its dignity, not as a trophy, but as a practice, the way one holds anything that matters carefully, consistently, even when no one is watching. And sometimes, in the specific ordinary grocery store of an evening, someone is watching. Someone quiet, in a blue blazer, who does not intervene immediately, but who does not look away. And that, too, is a choice. And choices, as they always do, determine what comes next. Angela walked out of Hartwell Market on a Saturday in November, her bag in her hand, the yellow tulips wrapped in brown paper at her side. The light outside was the particular silver gold of late autumn in the city, the kind of light that makes ordinary streets look briefly like something worth painting, like the world has paused to show you the version of itself it is most proud of. She walked to her car. She put the bag in the back seat with the easy, practiced motion of someone who has made this trip 100 times and expects to make it 100 more. She drove home through the familiar corridors of the city she had chosen and stayed in and built something inside of, the streets she knew by the quality of their traffic and the position of their lights, the turns she made on instinct, without needing the names of the roads, and she did not think about the thing that had happened in October, not because it had not mattered, but because she had already decided what to do with it, to put it in the place where all the things that had tried to diminish her and failed were stored, and to go home, and to put flowers in the jar on the windowsill, and to make something good for dinner, and to sit across from her daughter at the kitchen table and listen to whatever complicated and specific thing the world had delivered to a small person that day. The richest person in any room is not always the one with the most money. Sometimes it is the one who walks out with their dignity intact when every other person in the room has surrendered theirs. Sometimes wealth is the thing you refuse to lose. Sometimes it is the choice, made quietly and without audience, to remain exactly who you are on an ordinary evening, in an ordinary store, buying sparkling water and yellow tulips, even when someone with every advantage in the world looks at you and decides, for reasons that have nothing to do with you, that you are less. The choice to be undimmed by that. The choice to go home. The choice to keep going.